But I think the best way to really convey the impact of our work is to hear it directly from a youth. And there's nothing like hearing from a youth who's experienced homelessness themselves. I'm incredibly honored to introduce Justice Williams to you tonight. She is a remarkable and tenacious young adult, and we've had the pleasure of working with her over the last few years. And Justice, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. I'm Justice, as Mary said. I'm 21 years old. I'm a first-generation college student. I am a pageant queen, a former certified nursing assistant, and so many more things than I can list. On top of that, I am a former homeless youth, as well as a former unaccompanied minor, who not only survived, but thrived. And I guess I want to preface, I do have notes. I know my life, I swear. I'm a rambler, I'm a talker. So I want to make sure that I'm not taking everyone's time and sharing just kind of some important parts. And I've noticed that I think my speech or my part is going to echo a lot of what has been said tonight. And I think for me, that really just proves that Mary's goal for Maslow Project has really come through, because the things that I'm saying aren't scripted by Maslow Project, and they aren't scripted by me even. They're written down so I don't miss them, but it isn't anything that I'm here to make something up. This is all just the truth. So without any further ado, I would love to give you a little brief history of me. So my parents divorced when I was only 5 years old, and this began my joint custody household journey. Drugs and alcohol and mental health really inhibited my parents' ability to be parents. I attended 3 elementary schools in 3 separate districts before finding a little bit of stability in the Phoenix Talent School District. So seeing Kirsten on there, sorry, I'm a little choked up already. All the videos are very inspiring and very important. And she is very, like, when she says that she wants to hear, you know, she was saying, say hello to her other clients. That is really how Maslow approaches things. I've had her reach out to the past, her and another caseworker for my transitional living program. I'll talk about it a little bit more later, but they both reached out to me actually because a scholarship a couple years ago was trying to reach out to me and didn't have my current contact information. And so the fact that I had left the district, I don't even live in Medford anymore. I'm in Corvallis for school. And these caseworkers were still thinking of me, still had my contact info and were in contact with me, and were willing to reach out to me still and give me that time of day was just so valuable. And it was a scholarship I ended up applying for and receiving. So had I not had these connections in my community already, I don't know if I can say that I really would have had that scholarship. And let me tell you, college is expensive. So I will take all the scholarships I can get. When I was around 10, my mother, brother, and I became the dream team, as my father had left the picture. And without an education past early high school, as well as mental and physical health issues, my mother was not able to maintain a job for long periods of time. This led to a string of impulsive job quitting, firing, and moving. Couch surfing off and on was always a norm to my childhood. Even still, couch surfing evolved from a family event to an individual event where I was seeking housing from my friends and family. Sorry. In middle school, we uprooted to Texas, where, keep in mind, I'm going to say all these different places I lived. This was all in the span of about 6 months. It was summer plus 2 months, so 5 months, where we lived in a car, where I ended up moving to Indiana for most of those 5 months with my grandmother, and then ultimately in a trailer with a stranger and my mother and my brother, and starting my 8th grade year 2 months late. And after a wonky year in Texas, we made it back to Oregon, where I had stability in school for about 2 years. I still couch surfed and lived with lots of friends. And my junior year, my mom again decided she would like a change of scenery and wanted to move to Indiana, which I just did not want to do. And so she told me that if I could find a place to be, a place to live, I could stay in Oregon. And so at that point, I had been working with Kirsten for a few years, and my first instinct was to go ask her for help, for resources. I didn't know where I was going to stay. And she put me in contact with Angela, who was my caseworker for my transitional living program. After I applied, I spent my summer in California with my grandmother, and I flew back to Oregon by myself at 15. I'm a youngin', I'm a 2000s baby. So at 15, where I ended up moving in with a friend until an apartment opened up for me that December. So at 16, I was in my first apartment, and finally, eventually, after being in an apartment for 2 years, um, started my adult life early. I graduated high school with an honors diploma and 4 years perfect attendance. I was still homeless, mind you, those 4 years, the majority of those 4 years, and was still able to achieve that. And now, as I said before, I'm a first generation college student. I'm studying at Oregon State University, and I should be graduating this spring with a degree in biohealth sciences with a pre-med focus and a medical humanities certificate. And I know all of this has been a handful and a half, but if you can believe it, this doesn't even scratch the surface. This doesn't explain how I survived. This doesn't even show all the different experiences. Every couch surfing story is a different one, let me tell you. Living with lots of different people, there's lots of different stories to be had. And I like to think of childhood like a puzzle. When we think of this puzzle, we don't always give it a second thought that kids would attend school regularly, eat regularly, have proper clothing and supplies, play sports, and attend school dances. But in reality, these parts of my childhood came primarily from the help of Maslow Project and Kirsten Cronin, who were able to provide me resources and experiences. From shampoo and conditioner to prom, junior, and senior year, Maslow Project met not only my basic needs, but experiences I now cherish. And I would like to point out that while I've never been shy to share my story and advocate for a better life for myself and others in the homeless community, it is important to remember that most children are not able to advocate for themselves. And as children, it's really not even their responsibility in the first place. I hope by sharing my story that I help end harmful stereotypes around experiencing homelessness and encourage others to advocate for themselves. Because homelessness is not who you are, but something you face. And maybe one day, with the help of people who really care, like you and I, something no one, and especially, we're just scrap that. It's really, I'm hoping that between you and I here today, and between all the wonderful people at Maslow Project and all the wonderful people nationally helping, that one day we won't have homelessness for anyone, and especially not children. So I want to just thank you all for being here, and it has really been an honor and my privilege to share my story.
Thank you, Justice, for being courageous enough to share a little bit about your experiences. And we both got through that section without crying too much. So just a little bit I got going there. But
I got some out during the videos, so I think I was able to compose myself a little bit better.
Oh, it's wonderful. So for our attendees, we're going to do a little bit of Q&A, and I've got some questions lined up for you. So tell me about some of the high school experiences you touched on a little bit, but what were some of the experiences that you got to have, and what did that mean to you that you were able to just engage in that way?
Yeah, going beyond just like resources I needed, it was really nice to maintain like certain aspects of childhood that just should be in a childhood. Like I said, I kind of imagined it like a puzzle. And so some of my best experiences, one was being cross country. I didn't think I would ever do sports. I'm not particularly sporty to begin with. I somehow got roped in by my teacher and coach to try it one year. And the only reason I was able to try it is because Maslow Project provided shoes, track clothes. They helped me get into a physical with a doctor so that I would be able to play my sports. And I wouldn't have had any of that, like I said, without Maslow Project. Unfortunately, I found out very quickly I don't like running. So cross country was not my sport, but it's still a great experience. I still have all the photos and memories from it. And I still had a great time bonding with my team and peers. And it was one thing too that really helped me feel normal. You know, you don't, even though growing up homeless, that does feel normal to a degree because you're not used to seeing other people, you do start to see other people in school, and you do start to realize that you're not really in the norm to be sleeping in your car or with a lot of other families. And both prom, my junior and senior year, I know maybe that doesn't sound big, but it was more than just like a ticket to prom. It was my ticket to prom. It was my lunch or dinner dates with my friends via gift cards to various local restaurants, and my dress. And I think as well, like I believe Kirsten offered transportation to me and my friends because she wasn't sure if I would be able to even get to the prom. Luckily, I didn't need that, but it was still super awesome to have that opportunity there as well, because there are people that don't have that same luxury as me. But ultimately, like, it really is just the stuff that makes you feel like a kid and feel normal. Like, I didn't feel like a kid often, and I know even now, like, my mom used to joke and say I came out as a little old lady. And so I've always been a lot more mature, but the thing is that like most homeless youth aren't like this. Like, this is my coping mechanism, is to like throw myself into like survive and thrive mode. But a lot of other youth don't do that. And so to be able to actually let them have childhood, and for me too, I was also an older homeless youth when I came into Maslow Project's resources. And so there wasn't a whole lot of childhood you could give back to me, but the childhood that I did get to have, and the memories that I do get to have now, are very, near and dear to my heart.
Thinking about other kids who might not have the same motivation or the drive that you had, I think maybe even your brother, what would you say to help people understand why, it's easy to look at a young lady like you who's so driven and motivated, and of course you're going to do well, but all kids really deserve these opportunities, and they're not all in the same place at the same time. So can you reflect sort of on some of the challenges that maybe your brother experienced and how that might be different?
Yeah, I think especially something I noticed, because I had a friend who was also my age and in a similar situation. And so luckily we also had each other for that. But she had a younger sibling as well. And what we both noticed that we've reflected on now is that we kind of became parents in this role. And so we were able to shield our younger siblings a little bit. And I think that allowed them to be children longer. And that's why they're not at the level of advocating for themselves. And I don't think that's bad at all. I don't think the child should have to advocate for themselves in the long run either way, because it can be really hard to do. But even like with my own family, my brother had a lot of issues getting to and from school, and my mother didn't push him to go, and she wasn't always home. It's not entirely that it wasn't that she didn't care even at all. It was that she wasn't home. She's trying to maintain what job she could have. But even like that, like I went out of my way. I remember when I got my apartment, a little bit after I introduced that to my friend, because I knew she was in a similar situation. And so she also applied for the program and got in, and her apartment was a couple blocks away from mine. So once I had a car and a license, I would drive to her house, pick her up in the morning. And then at that point, my mother and brother were living in Ashland. So we would actually drive past school. And so I would pick him up as well and then bring him to school with us, and we'd all be in school together. But maintaining like the ability to go that and the drive there, like I don't necessarily know that.
I think it was 3.
Yeah, it's intense, and there's a lot. And I think it's really hard to want to advocate for yourself when all these harmful stereotypes are here saying, homeless people are lazy, they're stinky, they're this, they're that. My own grandmother on a few occasions actually would point out someone on the street and say, well, they must have burnt all their bridges. And I was thinking to myself, whatever, I'm 11, 12, 15, whatever age I was, and what bridges did I burn? I was born and then homeless. It wasn't something I chose, and it's not something any homeless person chooses ultimately. And I think breaking down these negative stereotypes and then just encouraging advocation and reaching out for what you need is really what's going to make people successful, but also having these resources. I know that really success isn't individual, in that like I wouldn't be where I am today without the help of Maslow Project and the people who care about me and Kirsten. And to me, you would think that a school district wants every kid to be successful, and to me they're just pushing out a whole population of kids who really need help, and especially because these kids are underrepresented because they're not advocating for themselves or can't. And they're underrepresented because a lot of people just don't even know the definition of homelessness, not understanding that couch surfing. Yes, I had a roof over my head, but it wasn't stable. It wasn't my house. It wasn't my family. And just recognizing these things and going from there.
So you've said to me that important to you to change the face of homelessness? And we're going to show a couple photos in a minute that will help illustrate that. What is it you hope that your future, holds for you?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, ultimately, like these stereotypes, I think in general is what holds the whole homeless community down. Because no one likes being told that they're lazy. A lot of the homeless people I've personally met and been friends with are the hardest working people I know. But imagine trying to maintain a job when you don't have, just access to a shower. You don't want to be doing stuff when, sorry, my brother's in the kitchen cooking. We don't, it's just, I don't know. But for me, so I have started working on a blog that I'm trying to turn into a nonprofit about changing the face of homelessness. Because the other thing is that I just don't think there's any one way that homelessness looks. And I'm tired of people, when they think of homelessness, they think of someone under the bridge or someone in a box. And like, realistically, that's not the majority of homeless people. And yes, that is a problem too, but that's not something that you should be blaming the person for. I've noticed that a lot of communities that don't want homeless people around try to push them out rather than help them. And for me, it just doesn't make sense, because you're not doing anything with those people aside from tearing them down as people and degrading them, dehumanizing them. But also, you're not getting rid of the problem. You're just, I don't know, pushing it in the next town over, or not even pushing it at all. I mean, a lot of times there's just relocation within the town. If you really want to solve the problem, we have to start by making these changes and realizing that homeless people aren't bad people. I don't even like, it's hard to even say homeless people as like a term, because I don't want anyone to see that as like a personal characteristic or flaw. It's not, it's a situation, it's an experience that people face and go through. But I think it's taken too much to heart sometimes. And it's really funny to me sometimes, because people see how successful I am, and I don't think anyone would ever bat an eye and be like, oh, that girl looks like she could have been homeless, And so that's where changing the face of homelessness really gets me, because it's important to realize that if we define this one specific face, we're pushing out everyone else, and we're never going to be able to actually see them and help them until we're able to realize that anyone can be homeless and just recognize that.
Well, we're certainly glad that you are working with us and helping to change that face of homelessness. And I'm honored that you shared your story tonight and have been chatting with me. And so let's see a few photos to celebrate where you've been and where you're at now.